Well, I want to title this Three U.S. Controversial Flags. Some were very controversial at the time, and maybe not so controversial today. And some are controversial today and were controversial at the time also. 1776, Join or Die. This was actually a true revolution. It was a time when we, the United States of America, or we, the colonies, declared our 13 colonies declared ourselves to be independent of the UK due to the tea tax and other draconian taxes that were being levied upon the colonists. But in retrospect, the taxes that were levied upon the colonists are trivial compared to what's going on today. The colonists at that time boarded the ships in the Boston Harbor, and they dressed guised as American Native Indians, and they took the tea and threw it overboard. We shall not pay tax on this tea. That was one way to get them, and that's one that always the best way to get them. Not just controversy or protesting, but by hitting them right where it counts, in a merchandise pocketbook. Another revolutionary type of movement that came about in the United States was actually against our own newly formed American government. You probably don't recognize this flag. It's the flag of the Whiskey Rebellion. It came about due to a tax, the first domestic tax to be levied upon the citizens, the citizens of the newly formed United States of America, and it was the whiskey tax of 1791. Mainly, the ones that rebelled against this were located in western Pennsylvania. For many, many, many years, they were making their whiskey from the excess production of corn and other products and wheat that they had left over from the harvest, and they were not taxed upon it. So the government, the newly formed government, was still trying to find ways to pay for the Revolutionary War that broke them free from England. Now, honestly, a lot of the taxation that came about that did pay for that was from the South on the cotton tariffs. It was even going back in the 1790s, and even after the War of 1812, there was more taxes added in 1828. But the South almost rebelled, almost broke away. But you could see what happened even well before that, even in the North, in western Pennsylvania. The Whiskey Rebellion was suppressed and put down militarily by George Washington, our first president at the time. Um, that's the second flag in the United States that you could say that it was a flag of controversy, a flag of rebellion, or whatever. This is the flag of not just the Confederacy, but also the South Carolina 8th Regiment. I have two direct ancestors going back to Confederacy, South Carolina 8th Regiment, with my same last name, and other direct ancestors going back to South Carolina, where it all started, as a matter of fact, as you know, the first state to secede. Now, this actually was not a rebellion. It was a legal secession, later declared to be illegal, but if you look at the wording of the Constitution at the time, it was 100% legal. What was illegal was actually the American Revolution of 1776. It was illegal, but it was just. Um, the Whiskey Rebellion of 1791, I deem it to be just, but obviously it was illegal because it was the law of the land. What happened in South Carolina, then later Georgia, then Florida, this third state to secede from the Union, was legal and just due to a 250% increase in the tariff on cotton. And when you go back to the time when King George raised taxes on tea, that was a 5% tax. That was not a 250% increase in taxes. So this unit, I actually want to go a little more detail on it because, you know, history gets written by the victors. If England had won, the UK had won, the British Empire had won, they would be writing history. Well, actually, their version of history and they're taught in their schools is far different than what it's taught over here. But anyway, I just want to get into some little bit about the South Carolina 8th Infantry Regiment, which was organized in Marion, South Carolina during the spring of 1861. Now, and I have other direct ancestors that bear my name, but two of them were in this unit, and they were in it for the entire war, from early on, from April, from the spring of 1861, all the way up to the time at the end in early 1865. The entire time. They saw every one of these battles. Two of my direct ancestors in my name. Many of the men from Darlington and Marion counties. The units moved to Florence. Then during the May were ordered to Virginia. It fought at the 1st Manistee under General Bonham before it's being assigned to General Kershaw's, Kennedy's, and Connor's brigade. The 8th Regiment of South Carolina was engaged in many conflicts from the 7-day battles to Gettysburg. Actually, in Gettysburg, they had 33% casualties. They moved to Georgia with Longstreet and was active at Chickamauga and Knoxville, Tennessee. Returned to Virginia, participated in the battles of the Wilderness, Spotsylvania, Pennsylvania, Cold Harbor, and then saw action in Shenandoah Valley with Early, at General Early. Later, it was involved in the North Carolina campaign. The regiment reported 5 killed, 23 wounded at the 1st Manistee. Well, let me put it to you this way. Here it goes on here at the end. Out of the entire regiment of over 300, only 52 survived for duty at the time they surrendered with the Army of Tennessee. 2 of them were my direct ancestors with my name. I just want to point out that, today, the major media likes to make it sound that the Confederacy fought for slavery. You don't freaking fight through all those battles for slavery. I can almost guarantee you that right there on the face of it for pure logic. But I just have to add lib on here just to give you another factoid. During the time of slavery, the big plantation owners actually took all the gainful employment away from the 97% of white people that did not own slaves, and the 97% of white people that did not own slaves had to compete with the slave labor wages of the big plantations. So gainful employment was very difficult to find in the South for the average white person due to slavery. It's as if you were competing with, I don't know, labor from Vietnam or Indonesia or something today, and later on you're being accused that you were fighting for labor from Indonesia and Vietnam, whereas you absolutely were not. You were fighting for your country. That's the heart of the argument, actually, whereby, but what is really going on here, the big media, which is the big power, the big corporation, and the globalist, do not want you to think independently. Actually, the United States ceased to exist as in the spirit of the true American Revolution of 1776 after the Confederacy lost the war in 1865. It then became the Union. It then became big corporation. It then became centralized control. And ever since then, we've been having our liberties eroded piecemeal, very slowly, but surely, step by step. I just want to put this out as another controversial flag, and we'll just look at some more things here. This was the motto of the Confederacy, Dio Vindici, which actually, some people look at Vindici and they say, under God we will be vindicated. Actually, it's under God we will conquer. I think that some people take the Latin and they see the English word vindicated in it, but it means conquer. Under God we will conquer. God is on our side. And, it may actually turn out to be that way because economically it looks like the South is doing much better than the Northeast in many ways. As a matter of fact, if we looked at what could possibly have been claimed by the Confederacy, which would include Kentucky, Missouri, and even Maryland. Maryland was a Confederate state, believe it or not. The only reason it did not go to the Confederacy was because Abraham Lincoln actually jailed all the legislators so they couldn't vote to secede from the Union, because they were going to secede from the Union. And if that happened, Washington, D.C. would have been totally isolated. A lot of people don't know that. Actually, part of Delaware would have actually gone over to the Confederacy too if that had happened. So, and I just don't want to knock the rest of the United States, because in the Midwest, the Northwest, even large parts of California, the extreme upper England, New England states of Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, upstate New York, western Pennsylvania, it would pretty much be on par with the spirit of the Confederacy. Really, the biggest problems are centered around the Northeast, the New York metropolitan, and Boston, Washington, D.C., and Los Angeles areas more than anything, which are the financial districts of the United States of America, which are actually controlling all the rest of the country and raping all the rest of the country, just like the carpetbaggers of old, through the Washington, D.C. federal government, which is centralized, which are trying to push to a global centralized government. Now, I do want to say that beyond the Confederate motto, I think the way that we really need to go back to is the old Latin motto, aut cum scuto, aut in scuto, either with your shield or on your shield, because it's coming down to a head whereby you're just going to have to you're going to have to pick sides, you're going to have to make a choice, and you're going to have to make a stand. One of the biggest things I see as a problem in the United States is total disinformation. And one of the things I need to actually keep harping on, even though it's unpopular, probably with the Google CEO and everything else, is about this Confederate issue. The Confederate issue is actually something that goes right to the heart of independence and against the globalist. It actually goes straight to the heart of independent free thinking. They like to say it was all about slavery, but quite obviously it wasn't about that at all. And if you look back at the colonists, many of the colonists who fought against King George owned slaves. It was something that was just going on throughout the world. The only reason it wasn't going on so much in the North was that they were not an agricultural society. But being the hypocritical people that many people, well, I don't want to say the people in the North, but the money people are, the banking industry in the North actually held slaves as collateral on their books for loans made to Southerners. They actually wrote insurance policies on slaves' lives in the South to the plantation owners. Many of the plantation owners in Louisiana, for instance, in the state of Louisiana, were actually Northerners. They weren't even Southerners. That's another thing, because the money people moved in there even way before the war between the states. Also, slave labor, even though slavery was illegal in the North, slave labor was leased to Northern interests with canal building and railroad building during the off-growing season in the South. So, the railroads and the canals, the people that built the Erie Canal, part of that was built with slave labor, which actually includes part Irish, which I'm actually a little bit of Irish too. Actually, I got 1% black someplace. I was surprised about. Well, I wasn't totally surprised, because anybody that lives in this country a long period of time, or has any ancestry going back a long period of time. I have my grandfather's ancestry goes back I don't know, the 1600s. There's a little bit of black someplace, so actually I have a little bit of that from him. Um, but I did want to point this out that rebellion has been in the blood of Americans ever since it formed, and rebellion is still going on. As you can notice through the internet waves and the airwaves, I think that it's going to continue this way, and no matter what they try to do, the more they try to stop us, the more we fight back. That's really what it comes down to. And it's quite obvious that I don't think the human spirit can be crushed. Now, there's possibly ways they could do it, but um, you have to be adept in watching out for their next move and in which ways they can crush your spirit. Because being proactive and taking actions before they make their move is very, very important. Just as the colonists back in the day, when they fought against the British, they didn't quite do it out in the open all the way, did they? No, because they would have lost. Such is the modus operandi of people on the internet, because I have to not tell you everything because it's not, I can't. But this video basically is kind of to inform people about, our revolutionary heritage. Not only 1776, but also the Whiskey Rebellion, which started in western Pennsylvania, but also the Confederacy. And if you don't like the Confederacy, you might want to think of it as um, more than what the cliches that you've been brainwashed into, because I know as soon as you see this flag, some people are already conditioned to think it means something that it doesn't mean. Actually, I do want to point out again that, besides the economic hardships that slavery in the South caused to the 97% of the whites who did not own slaves, it actually caused the 97% of the whites that did not own slaves, it caused them economic hardship because their gainful employment was in direct competition with slave labor, which was owned by the wealthy whites. And in some cases, not all of them were white, but most of them were. Now, if you look at what happened during the Confederacy and the battles and how many people survived, absolutely no way in hell, even if you did own slaves and say the whole war was about slavery, would you go through this hell on earth for years to retain some slaves or something like that. And it's all part of the garbage myth that's going on through the New World Order controlled major media. And I did want to put this out about the South Carolina 8th Regiment, because these are two of my direct ancestors that were in it. They did survive. I got their military records, and it shows present, 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 all the way from early 1861 to late 1864. So they were in the entire time that I know and have documented. And those are my direct ancestors with my last name. And when I looked at what this unit went through, to go through that hell as a regular, they were not officers. They were regular enlisted. They were in the charges. They were charging up to all the hills themselves. For them to go through that, and then accuse people later on accusing these people of being haters and they're fighting for slavery, is the absolute most heinous lie going. But the lie has been perpetrated by the powers called the globalists in the major media, because they don't want you to be independent. They don't want you to fight against draconian taxes or draconian rules. But the Confederate spirit has been in this country for many years prior to that. As a matter of fact, many of the Confederates considered it was 1776 all over again. It wasn't that many years from 1776 to 1861, only 80-something years. 2 generations back, well, actually one generation back, um, War of 1812. That was the next ancestor. The next generation back, 1776. And the next generation back, his father was 1776. He was a ranger in Captain Wise's Rangers. Battle of Moultrie, South Carolina again. Also, another one that was an officer under General Francis Marion in South Carolina, known as the Swamp Fox, for eluding the British forces. Well, I just want to point it out because the more they freaking lie and the more they tell lies about what happened in reality, the more I'm going to have to tell the truth. And I'll put it out in various different ways. I'm not going to put it out in the same way every time. So this is basically titled Three Flags in America, three flags of America that were rebellious. In the case of the Confederacy, I could say it wasn't rebellious. They were not trying to take over the United States. They were trying to secede from the draconian taxes. And Dio Vindici actually means with God or under God we will conquer, not we will be vindicated or something. I know somehow they misconstrue that. But I think the watchword for today really needs to be going back to the oldest, to the time in the Romans, aut cum scuta, aut in scuta, with your shield or on your shield, because it's a fight to the death. There's not going to be no quarter. There's no take no prisoners, whether it's us or them, and that's just how it's going to have to be. What can I tell you, right? That's the reality of the situation, and keep on trucking or keep on fighting, as we shall say.